These guys, they are completely unscrupulous, they are ruthless, and all they are interested in is getting what you have. They see it, I'm having it, and that's sort of the society we are in at the moment.
Hello, and welcome back to a brand new series of Crime Suspect. Each week, we'll be unravelling some of the UK's most prolific crimes, as well as providing in-depth analysis on the criminality that plagues our nation. On the show today, Don't Die for Canada Goose. With designer watches and coats now deemed a bigger lure than drugs to weapon-wielding criminal gangs, are we seeing the start of a new luxury crime trend? Next, and new to the show, our brand new item, Good Cop, Bad Cop, where we'll be bringing you the best and worst of policing. And finally, it's your chance to book a crook as we show you this week's wanted criminals. Joining me for all of this today is former armed robber turned TikTok addiction mentor, Paul Simmons.
Hi.
Recoveries and Development Manager of the Watch Register, Catherine Alexander. Criminologist and author, James Treadwell. And last but not least, former Senior Metropolitan Police Officer and author, Leroy Logan. Now, you have the right to remain watching. This is Crime Suspect. The luxury crime trend is increasingly becoming more prevalent and more profitable for street gangs. Over recent years, we've seen groups of knife-wielding thugs, better known as the Rolex Rippers, wreaking havoc in West London, stealing watches and selling them on the black market. Now, Lawless Britain's latest must-have luxury items include the likes of Canada Goose jackets and AirPods, with Brits across the country being robbed and their cars and homes broken into for the likes of these designer goods. We're seeing an increase in our overall crime rate here in the UK because of these types of offences and others, and leading criminologists have warned this is just the beginning. James, a few weeks ago, Transport for London said there was an 83% rise on the network of thefts of things like Canada Goose jackets, North Face coats and the like. Who's committed this crime and what's driving it?
I think what you've got to see is it's largely young men, and nowadays this is the sort of entry-level offending that has replaced traditional types of crime that would have been the entry-level offending for these young men. Typically and historically, offenders started very often with shop thefts, and shop thefts are increasing as well, but they also started with crimes like burglary as an entry-level crime,
So
and taking
like
vehicles, twocking.
Oh yeah, stealing cars. So it was kind of like, if you're going to become part of a gang, you've got to prove yourself, you've got to commit a crime to do that, and in the past, climb through that window.
Yeah, the difference was historically that the material possessions that we had that tended to be expensive, high value, easily concealable, easily transported, were located in the home. You could go in, you could take a video player, you could take the television, you could take it down to the local pawnbrokers, the taxi office, you could, which used to be a bit of a hotbed of criminality, and you could sell that for cash. What has really changed is the extent to which we carry round with us very, very high value items that have a high value resale price. So that is exactly what the Rolex watch or the Breitling watch is. And added to that, increasingly, those signs are very much outwardly, overtly advertised to people. So I'm wearing Balenciaga trainers and an expensive T-shirt, an expensive designer jacket, sends out a symbol. But it also sends out a symbol to offenders that this is someone who has material possessions on them and who has some money.
Paul, you spent a lot of time with these kind of criminals, the ones that went to jail because you've done an awful lot of time.
Yeah, well, I was one of them. You know, we have a saying now: roadman, roadmen, all of that, the balaclavas, the dark clothes, all of that. That's the guys now who are committing the crime, which I find quite strange. Because me personally, I committed crime to fund addiction. You know, and thankfully I got through that. But at the moment, it seems they're wanting these things. It's not always for financial gain. It's because they want those things.
Oh, so they want to steal it, to put it on their wrist.
Yeah, they want those watches. They want those jackets. They want the tech.
Right.
That's what it's really about. It's nowhere near to do with how bad their lives come from. It is not that. This is all about, you have something that I aspire to have. So I'm going to take that from you. And it doesn't matter whether, like I said, you're in addiction, whether you're selling drugs, whether you're in and around that sort of behaviour, the roadman life. It's getting well out of hand. I live in a town, Swindon, and the Canada Goose jacket, I know a school kid, 14-year-old boy, who had one taken off of him on the way to school. Now, these guys, they are completely unscrupulous, they are ruthless, and all they are interested in is getting what you have. They see it, I'm having it. And that's sort of the society we are in at the moment.
Talking exactly of that, I had some very disturbing footage come into me only today of a recent robbery of a watch from a man. Let's just have a quick look and see some of this dreadful footage. Leroy, having seen that quite shocking footage of a man with a small child who becomes a victim of a vicious robbery, what kind of investigation from the Metropolitan Police can we expect into this crime?
Well, I think it'd have to be a high priority investigation, especially the fact that it's clear he's been targeted and he's been focused on because he's vulnerable with a child. They spotted him before, but they were laying in wait, as they say. And as a result of that, very premeditated, and also the fact that he's been subject to a vicious beating, and it was prolonged.
In terms of the investigation, we saw from one clip what appears to be the two robbers sitting in wait for the victim. Would perhaps a CCTV search be expanded out from there to see if we could trace how they arrived there, how they got there, all with a view to trying to identify them?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are on the CCTV capital of the world, and I've been led to believe that's in southeast London. So obviously they'll be backtracking to see where these youngsters, where they came from, because they were sending out some quite clear signals on how they were dressed, you know, the do-rags and so forth.
Paul, did you serve any time with people who had committed these types of offences?
Absolutely loads. Like I said, I spent 22 whole years in prison over several sentences, and I come across lots and lots and lots of people. And we're not just talking about, I have to say this, it's not just Londoners, English people. I know lots of Russians and Polish and Hungarians, and they're all involved in the organised crime. And when I say organised crime, I mean organised taking of high valued items, you know, and people tell lots of tales, and you have to understand that footage that we've seen. There was a spotter, not just sat on that bench, but someone was following that victim of crime all the way to the point, letting them know the whole way that he's coming. So they've had spotters, whether it's young kids, because, you know, this gets brought into it. You can literally bring county lines into this straight away because it's those young kids who are doing the spotting. They're telling them where these victims are going. And half the young kids, they don't actually understand what they're getting involved in.
When we think about organised crime, we think about big gangs, multinational links, cross-border criminality and the such like. Would you say that because of the spotters and the elements of organisation that goes into these offences, we could bracket this as organised crime, or does it not hit that bar?
It's a complex one. I mean, there are over 150 different definitions of what constitutes organised crime. Right. So, you know, we can tear ourselves apart in it. And there are elements of the offence that are clearly organised. I think Pulling it back and drawing it back, though, into something that everybody's been saying, what's really interesting for me about this is it's changing cultural attitudes to an extent. And I think we see it really, really apparently. I've written about the riots in 2010 in England, where notionally, in the first instance, in London at least, that's a protest at the police killing of Mark Duggan. It quickly becomes anything but that. And look at where the young people went to. They went to, not to protest, but they went to loot high-end designer stores.
JD Sports
JD
for
Sports
trainers.
for trainers, Armani, they targeted the mailbox in Birmingham and Pretty Green in Manchester. You know, this was going after high-end valuable goods because the value system that they have nowadays, from all sorts of angles, bombards them with, you are defined by what you consume. Wherever you go, one thing is globally noticeable, and that is that your success in the world of today, in the consumerist world of today, is at least in part demonstrated by what you've got and what you can demonstrate overtly. Absolutely. And that will have an impact on criminal mores and criminal cultures, undeniably.
Catherine, the Watch Register has recently signed an agreement with the Metropolitan Police, which I'm delighted to hear about, in terms of recovering some of these very valuable watches and the like. If, for example, a young man is detained by the police, has a high-value watch on them, which it would appear they've not gained through lawful employment, what's the process for that police officer? What should they do?
So we work free of charge for international law enforcement. So any member of law enforcement globally can just take the serial number, take a note of the make and model of the watch, and then get in contact with us. We will check the item for them and let them know if that has been reported as lost or stolen in the past.
Is that by telephone or online, or how do they contact you?
So they would contact us via our website, or through our info at the Watch Register mailbox, and they can get in touch with us and we'll give them some more information on how we can work with them.
And somebody who is well aware of the shocking rise in these types of crime, from manufacturers and other partners that you speak to and work with, can you offer any advice to people about how not to become a victim? My
advice to people is think about the risk, keep it concealed. If you really must, wear the item, make sure that you have a note of that item's unique serial number. If the worst were to happen and you were to report that theft to us or to the police, that is the only thing on that watch that makes it unique. We might think that our Daytona is the only one out there, but it's not. There are hundreds of thousands of them. So without that information, we're not going to be able to help find that for you, and we're not going to be able to help the police find the perpetrators.
Leroy, it galls me to the pit of my stomach to say that I agree with Catherine in that don't wear that watch. I hate having to say that, but as a bit of crime prevention advice, it's almost blatantly obvious. Yeah. Through having to say that, does this reflect as a failing on British police these days?
No, I think, in all honesty, we have a limited number of officers. They can't be everywhere. So it's incumbent on everyone to think carefully, do their own personal risk assessment. It's just like the Amir Khan. You remember he was coming out of a restaurant with his wife in East London, and they picked on him because they know he's not going to have a real go because he's got his wife there. And he had to hand over it because, they've done their work. So, unfortunately, it's the way of the world. And especially now, a cost of living crisis, it's hard times for people. So I'm not saying that's a reason just for being criminally minded, but there's certain people, their tolerance level is low, and they think, well, actually, it's just happened, and they have a go. And I suppose that's something that we all have to deal with in our day-to-day lives.
Paul, we've heard a lot about spotters.
Yeah.
Can you help us with some advice about how to spot a spotter?
Well, it's not as simple as that, really. I couldn't say you can spot a spotter, and that's the truth of it. It could be a kid on a little BMX just floating around and you've got no idea what's going on. Next minute, you're getting robbed for your £2,000 watch.
While I'm always in favour of good, sensible, pragmatic crime prevention advice, I think you've got to be you've got to be careful about how you give it. The bit that concerns me more in terms of how people demonstrate themselves now is a tendency towards perhaps oversharing on social media. So people will say, you know, I've got this genuine, authentic, or look at my new car, you know, that I've just picked up. And what they fail to recognise is that's not just being shared to people that they know, but people that they know and who they know and who they know. And before you know it, in effect, what you've done is to put that out there publicly. And that is where you can be spotted in a way that you might not even realise that it's
spotted online,
spotted
not
online.
In the real world.
Yeah, absolutely. But the online world is very much also the real world.
Thank you. Extremely helpful. And thank you to you all for a fantastic discussion. Right, moving on to this week's Cop Watch. Good cop this week, and praised as a true hero, is Michael, who's an inspector in the Metropolitan Police's Special Constabulary. While off duty, Michael helped to take everyone to safety at the scene of a blazing fire, which had been started by a crane lorry on the M20. He alerted the emergency services, and the swift response from Michael and everybody else meant that everyone escaped the fire completely unharmed. That was Michael off duty. Heroic. Bad cop, and proving he's not above the law, is a former Gwent police officer who sent sexually inappropriate messages to colleagues and a vulnerable victim of crime. The force has controversially refused to name this officer or reveal his rank on health grounds, referring to him only as Police Officer A. This ex-male officer resigned before the actions to fire him were taken, but he's put on the College of Policing's barred list. He also cowardly refused to attend his discipline hearing, so he didn't even hear himself being fired, so to speak. Enough said. All right, it's time for the part of the show where we bring you the mugs of thugs who are terrorising our streets. Have you seen these criminals? First up is this suspect. Officers would like to speak to James Harrison following the recovery of a large quantity of Class A drugs from a property in Bootle in September 2023. He is described as a white male, 5'5" tall, with red hair and blue eyes. Next, we have Liam Cannon from Farnham, who's wanted on breach of court bail. He is described as white, short brown hair, green eyes, and he also has links to London. Lastly, do you recognise this man? Police are appealing to trace this person after an assault in a pub in Islington left a man with life-changing facial injuries after he was attacked with a knife. The suspect left before police arrival. If you think you know or have seen any of these crooks, get in touch anonymously with Crime Stoppers on 0800 555 111. Right, that's all we've got time for this week. Many thanks to Paul, Catherine, James and Leroy. Be sure to leave us a comment, like and subscribe, and we'll be back next week for more Crime Suspects.